Hero Club presents Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu.
Welcome to Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu, episode 85. We're 15 episodes away from our 100th episode. I am your host and co-creator, Wheelchair21, and before I introduce you to our other guests for the night, we have an interesting show for you, as this was practically an episode I had on the back burner in case our original plans did get thrown out the window, which were originally us looking at the Lupin Ranger versus Pat Ranger series as a whole. However, we've preempted that discussion for a later time, and we are going to be talking about the King of the Monsters this episode. And like I said, that's going to be our main highlight. We'll get more into why we're going to be talking about the King in a bit. But let's say hello to, first off, Sound Out Frickin' 12.
Sound Out Frickin' 12 has 26 of 28 Godzilla movies and really wish someone would release the last two.
And, along with Sound Out, is another Godzilla aficionado. He is none other than the Visible Ninja.
I don't have as many movies, but I'm very slowly working on that.
Yeah, the funny thing about Visible Ninja is, while he doesn't have them on home video release, he has at least seen all of them and has enjoyed them as a kid growing up.
That's the thing. I've seen them all. I own, most... I'm only missing Biollante from Heisei. I have all Millennium, and I need, 8
Showa, if I recall.
8 Showa. So, yeah, I'm getting there slowly.
Yeah, so we brought him in, so we have at least a good holy trinity that you need for a podcast. Mucha is unavailable tonight, even though he would probably have loved to been on this episode, as well as he'd love to been on the original plan to be the Lupin Ranger versus Pat Ranger. However, his job and schedule is ever so hectic when we try to record these nice episodes on Monday nights. So, this episode was a backup plan. I literally had this episode planned out as if we needed it for around the time of the release of Godzilla King of the Monsters, which ironically so beholds is the fact that when the 2019 King of the Monsters airs, not the original 56, this episode will be coming out on that weekend, and we're going to do a little bit of a crash course of Godzilla on beginners, and ironically enough, someone bigger and famous than us actually released their version of a Godzilla for beginners a couple of weeks ago, which was obviously Cinemassacre, James Rolfe, aka the Angry Video Game Nerd. He did a wonderful video that we do want you to recommend and go check out. The link for it will be in the description below if you haven't already seen it. And honestly, the way he breaks it down is a little similar to how we would have done it, or how we're going to do it. And he was able to compress it down a lot better into a, I guess you would say, 20-minute video editorial, whereas we're going to do an entire podcast editorial of us giving our picks and digressions towards either his choices or our own choices. And then we're going to just talk about the, I guess you would say, financial success of Godzilla as an entity as a whole, and the future of the property, such as Godzilla, Monsterverse, and so on and so forth. So if you've seen that video, you already know how we're going to try to break down this video for you. If you haven't, don't worry, you'll get caught up shortly. Or you could just pause the episode, go watch his, and come back. Anyways, with that being said, we're going to go right into the fact that with the Godzilla franchise, there is over at least 30 films in the series, practically up to date. You have several in the Showa. I think there was, about 11 or 12 films throughout 54 to 75. Then you have 7 films from 84 to 95. Then you had another 6 films from 99 to 2004. You also have Shin Godzilla in 2016. You have Godzilla from 2014. And you have King of the Monsters coming out by the time this episode airs. So you have a whole slither of films, plus the 98 film that I kind of omitted, even though it's an interesting film, but not for everyone. Did I nail it on the head so far, guys?
You're good so far.
Okay, so I'm good so far with at least giving you a rundown on how many films there are. We're not going to go through all the titles, hopefully not in this episode. We may mention them, but we're not going to give you a rundown in chronological order. Now, the series timeline is very hectic. It's very crazy. And the way that we can break it down for you, and we also did a huge in-depth discussion on how the actual franchise works in 3 previous episodes that broke down the timelines into Showa, Heisei, Millennium. But because of things that have changed in categories, we're going to break it down the right way and the proper way that the Japanese refer to these franchises. You have the original Showa era. Like we said, it's from 54 to 75. It goes from the original Gojira all the way up to Terror of MechaGodzilla. Terror of MechaGodzilla is the final stop in that series, and the depth of the films range from Godzilla being a villainous character out of just nature to this actual heroic evolving character that has sentience and emotions and feelings in a sense. Then in 84, we have the reboot, which is Godzilla 84, or The Return of Godzilla, better known as Godzilla 85 in North America, all the way up to Godzilla vs. Destroyer. These 7 films are a direct sequel to the original 54 and omits everything from Raids Again to MechaGodzilla. This actually culminates pretty well in a good series that people originally called the Heisei era. However, we've now learned that it's officially called the Versus era, from Biollante to Destroyer onwards. Then, once we get to 99 to Final Wars, most of the films are their own continuity outside of Against MechaGodzilla and Tokyo SOS, which are the only direct sequels in the film. So, in that series, you have Godzilla 2000, which was released in 99. You have Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla, which a lot of people always mistake as the direct sequel to 2000. You have Godzilla, Mothra, Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack. Godzilla Against Mechagodzilla, its sequel Tokyo SOS, Final Wars. And then you also have the American 2014 film, which is a soft reboot in a sense of the 54 Godzilla, who's just never attacked Japan and never really surfaced until 2014. And then you have Shin Godzilla, which is a new telling of the creature altogether. And then you have the current Monsterverse branching off of 2014's film. So, are we good? Did I get that all down
so far?
All right.
We're good so far.
All right, and ironically enough, just as soon as we concluded our timeline discussion, speak of the devil and he appears, Janitor Joker is actually joining us for this episode that I thought he wouldn't be for. So now we have a group of 4 talk about the rest of the Godzilla franchise. So, Mucha, were you excited that you got to pop in time?
I guess. I didn't even know what was happening. I just heard, a list, and I was like, what? A list about what? Can't be Godzilla. I have to be in every Godzilla podcast, Wheels. You know this. It's in my contract.
Oh, well, you didn't state that earlier about how your contract works.
So I have to go to Emery Jason for this shit again?
Yeah, you have to go to Emery Jason for this shit again. He's the HR guy.
Damn it. I thought Emery Jason was a she.
Who knows? We'll figure it out in the next episode.
Don't assume Emery Jason's gender.
I'm allowed to, because Emery Jason's my friend, I think. Or is Gamera my friend?
Gamera's everyone's friend.
It's not true.
Yeah, Gamera's everyone's friend.
Not in the Heisei era.
Yeah, well, that's another story. We're talking about Godzilla. Godzilla. All right. So, as I said, whoever that is, the king of the monsters. Okay, so as I said, though, we got the timelines done. So everyone knows how it breaks down, what's going on. And when it comes down to the types of fan, there are so many. There are the people who just drastically love the Showa era just for either its depth of value of the human aspect of just the creation of the artwork, the special effects, scenery and somewhat, and just the ideal story that was actually told with our human cast. There was also the love of the fact that it does get rather cheesy and psychedelic as the series progresses. So, just being a Showa fan in general is so many layers. You have the Heisei era, where the artwork of special effects continues to grow, and the depth of realism is obviously trying to be there while being a science fiction, I guess you would say, expose or, science fiction story or space opera kind of thing is being told. And then you get the Millennium Era, which is just crazy cash grabs with amazing special effects and works and whatnot. And that's one of the things about the detachment between fans is that, are you there for the story? Are you there for the monsters? Are you there for both? Or are you just casually viewing this for your first time? And that always ends up to being the huge issue when it comes to so many of these Godzilla fans, because there's the fans that believe that Godzilla is mostly about the monsters. They believe that Godzilla movies are practically Godzilla Final Wars, that the entire film is action, the entire film has kaiju. They believe that it has all these amazing moments like the half-hour fight witnessed in Godzilla vs. Megalon, the half-hour fight witnessed in Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. If you add up the entire time between Godzilla Mogira and Space Godzilla fighting, they believe that it's nothing but these fights, and that everything with the human cast are bland. And it's always, I guess you would say, a conflict of interests over, any country you're in about these films. And it's hard to really figure out what these films are for the mass audience, your casual audience, what will make them interested in this film, and how do you at least target those people you want to see this film. So, based on, in a sense, James Rolfe's choice of criteria, the idea is you want to not just have Godzilla in your picks of what you think these films mean to you, or what they would mean to trying to introduce fans into the series. Your picks also have to include other titular kaiju like Mothra, Ghidorah, and MechaGodzilla, because these are characters that have been repurposed several times throughout the 3 main Japanese films. Don't try to use the anime. Don't try to use Zone Fighter. Don't try to use the 1998 or the actual 2014 film or even Shin Godzilla. Just keep it to the original, like, 25 movies or whatnot, and go from there. You have to choose at least 5 apiece, and you gotta at least explain why. You can either agree with James's choices, or you can just do your own, straight up, but that's how we're gonna go with our picks, and just try to be very thoughtful of your 3 eras. Make sure you at least have a consistency of at least having a Mothra film, a MechaGodzilla film, and a Ghidorah film. Or, like I said, add on to James's expose, because, like I said, he has a really good format for your casual audience. To start us off, I'm going to go right to, actually, The Visible Ninja, and then we're going to pass it off to Sound Out, Mucha, then myself. That's the order, so we don't have to transition with me telling who to go next.
So, a standalone, well, I know James basically recommends the original, which is a good place to start. But if I had to recommend just a standalone, I would definitely go with 84, aka 85, aka Return to Godzilla. It's just a good movie, as well as a pretty good starting point that's not terribly tied down by past continuity or anything. It does somewhat acknowledge the original movie, but it's not required viewing. If you kind of roughly know who Godzilla is, 84, it's going to be pretty accessible. And not to mention, it's got some good action, and it is kind of the beginning of a new era, so that's definitely worth checking out. As for a Mothra movie, that's a bit harder, because there's a lot of good Mothra movies that aren't, Mothra's own dedicated, miniseries there. But if I had to go with a single Mothra movie, my personal favorite is actually the, Godzilla vs. Mothra Battle for Earth, because, it does have a sort of ham-fisted environmental message, but it does kind of relay everything that both Mothra and Godzilla are pretty well, and we also get to see, the evil Mothra, Batra, which is actually pretty damn cool, and he has a pretty awesome design. And a Ghidorah movie. That's a bit, I wouldn't go for the Heisei one, because of reasons. If I had to go for a Ghidorah one, I guess I'd probably go, OG, versus King Ghidorah, aka Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, because it's a classic. It has Kumi Mizuno in it, who is, one of the classic beauties of Japanese cinema.
That's actually Invasion of the Astro Monster.
I thought she was in Ghidorah.
No, she was not in Ghidorah.
Oh, it was Astro Monster?
Astro Monster was Kumi Mizuno with Nick Adams and Rodan.
Shite.
If you're referring to the actual one with the, with Ghidorah, that was actually one of the Bond girls.
Okay, I got her mixed up, okay.
It's fine,
okay,
you don't need to reiterate.
Invasion of the Astro Monster. And then MechaGodzilla. I would probably just go with against MechaGodzilla, because I love Kiryu. I love the idea that it's resurrected using the bones of the original Godzilla. And again, it helps to see the original 54, but you don't absolutely have to. They do somewhat explain kind of what happened in that one. And it's an interesting movie, and that has very nice visual effects.
You're also forgetting your 5th and final pick.
What was the criteria for that one again?
No, you just had to pick 5 movies.
Oh, just in general, okay.
With at least the 5 encompassing at least, the 3 eras.
The 3 eras.
And at least some of the movies either have to double up and feature some of the kaiju, or just primordially one of those 3.
Okay, if I have to go for a 5th one, if an Astro Monster is a good representation, I guess you'd say, of early Showa, I would probably go with the most batshit insane one as a representation of late Showa, which would be Megalon, just because it's goofy, it's kind of has a weird plot involving an underground civilization, as well as a random appearance by Gigan. And, of course, we have Jet Jaguar, the very Ultra-esque, smart robot. And the fights are somewhat infamous, but they're still enjoying to watch.
All right, so moving on to my list. Now, I'm going to go, more of an unconventional route in the fact that I don't really want to, the default answer is to say 54 Godzilla is a good place to start. I think that at this point, regardless of the fact that it is the starting point and it's a very historical film, I think for new viewers, even if you've never seen a Godzilla movie, Godzilla is a character that's existed in the public consciousness of pop culture across the world. So a lot of the movies that come up later work great off of the concept of you already know what happened in the first one, and they provide a lot of context clues. So for this list, I want to start off my number 1 being the one with the longest title, Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All-Out Attack. This 2001 film, I feel like, is a great introduction to Godzilla, Ghidorah, as well as Mothra, and you get a little Baragon thrown in for an extra little spice. But I think it's a really good place to start.
Wait. Let me add that correctly. You get a little extra bah.
Extra bah.
Cause the suit actress and her bah.
Bah. Anywho, GMK, as it's known, for a much shorter title, I think is a great place to start, simply because it has really high quality action sequences. The storyline is relatively engaging, and the film has a message that's not super ham-fisted in, so it kind of gives you a well-rounded experience. And because there's no previous continuity or future continuity, it works as a standalone film to introduce you to the Godzilla universe. Now, from there, I also would say that, moving backwards in time, and it's kind of unconventional, but I kind of want to go jumping around a little bit. I go backwards and check out, either Mothra versus Godzilla or Invasion of Astro Monster. Both of them are really good at establishing their characters, but I kind of put them in the same spot. I don't really they're my second and third picks, but I'm not really sure which I'd pick over the other. Because I feel like when it comes to Godzilla, once you've made that entrance into the universe, there's other stuff to explore. And I think with Astro Monster specifically, it has like this really weird quality to it where it doesn't feel like a Godzilla movie, so you get a little bit of genre variety so that you don't burn out super quickly on the tropes and different aspects of the Godzilla and Kaiju films. So it has that variety to it. And then Mothra versus Godzilla from 1964, I feel like is a great way to be introduced to Mothra as well as Godzilla. And it's probably the highlight of the versus movies of the Showa era, as I feel like the Showa era kind of tipped off after Ebirah, Horror of the Deep. And so the thing is, you get Mothra is at kind of like the peak Showa. It's right after they did the King Kong crossover. It's right before they started doing Ghidorah. And I feel like it's a very great self-contained movie. Now, moving forward, we have to have something involving one of my favorite monsters of all time, Rodan. And so for that, I'm going to pick Godzilla versus MechaGodzilla 2. Now, this one's a little tricky.
You have two Rodan movies on your list.
I know. Hear me out.
I'm just making the joke.
I know. So Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla 2, released in 1993, is the Heisei MechaGodzilla film, as it's essentially known. And I feel like over other movies featuring Rodan, this one gave him more of a starring role. Whereas Mothra got introduced into the Godzilla universe after her solo film, then into Godzilla as a title character, Rodan just kind of sort of shows up in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, and then appearing in Invasion of Astro Monster. So Rodan doesn't really get that big, hype point. He had his solo film, which one of my favorites of all time, and then he just kind of appears and just becomes one of the normal monsters you're used to seeing. But Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla 2 works to establish Rodan in the Versus series, which is its own continuity, and therefore gives him more of a presence and more of a power, especially with, Fire Rodan as well. I also really enjoy the MechaGodzilla design from this movie, and I think that in terms of MechaGodzillas, this one's a little bit different, but I think it kind of plays into some super robot tropes, which again, adds to the genre variety. That way you're not kind of feeling like you're watching 5 of the same movies. So for the final pick in this entire list of recommendations for first-time Godzilla viewers, I'm going to actually go and pull a controversial pick and recommend Godzilla Final Wars. And the reason why I'm recommending Godzilla Final Wars is not for the normal answers of, oh, it's really action heavy. Oh, there's a lot of this. There's a lot of that. What it is that when you've completed the first 4 films, you've been introduced to the major monsters of the franchise, you've gotten an overview and you got some genre variety to see where the series can be. And Godzilla Final Wars is going to throw at you pretty much every other monster that has appeared before, minus a few, of course. And you get to see them in action and then take that to go explore the rest of the franchise. For example, you may see King Caesar and say, hey, what movie was he in? You look it up, go see that movie, and see if you like it. Essentially, when it comes down to it, I find that Final Wars is a great way to have kind of a, taste tester for other monsters that Godzilla has faced and worked with in other movies. And so that's how I make my general 5 list. Now, I want to make an amendment list. Now, this amendment list is for those of you out there that think that Godzilla might be a little too harsh and he needs his wonderful son, Minya. Now, if you want the ultimate Minya list, Son of Godzilla, followed up with Destroy All Monsters Attack, and Godzilla Final Wars. And as soon as you're finished with that, go right into Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla 2, because that's the start of the Godzilla Jr. saga, continuing into Space Godzilla and Destroya. So for your complete 7-film arc of Godzilla's children, that is definitely the recommended list. But otherwise, for first-timers, the first list is your friend.
Okay, it's my turn now.
Go, stupid.
Hello? Is my
It's
mic
your
working?
turn. It's your
Okay,
turn.
I was just making sure, Wheels. God damn, Wheels. Well, anyway, back to the topic at hand of Godzilla recommendations, as my dog jumps off the bed knowing that I'm going to ramble for 5 years.
Picking a Godzilla movie is tough because generally you're going to have different audiences cater to different ideas in case of what they think of Godzilla or what they want from a Godzilla movie. And a lot of the movies that were mentioned today, Invasion of Astro Monster, Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla, the Heisei version, Godzilla vs. Mothra, Mothra vs. Godzilla. They all are pretty well in establishing what Godzilla is, as well as his other kaiju opponents like King Ghidorah, Mothra, and Rodan, and MechaGodzilla. So I just thought I'd try to be different, because I don't want to repeat same movies, but some of the movies I would say, and in the actual list is like Invasion of Astro Monster, Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla from the Heisei era. I would say Shin Godzilla is a good way to start, but we're not mentioning Shin Godzilla, so there's that. Godzilla 84, also a good start. Godzilla the original, also a good start. One that I would probably recommend, and I think it's because it really started Godzilla, really hyped up Godzilla's popularity and really defined what Godzilla is for a lot of people. It's either Godzilla versus King Kong versus Godzilla, or Godzilla versus the retarded cockroach, aka Megalon. Okay, so anyway, yeah, Godzilla vs. Megalon is interesting because that's the second Godzilla movie I ever saw. And I think from that movie on, I was hooked on the franchise. The first one I really loved when I was a kid, and I kept on watching it. And then I watched the second one, like, wait, he can fight other things that are big? What is this? What is this madness? And it introduces Gigan, another fan favorite character, Jet Jaguar, everybody's favorite Jack Nicholson impersonator. It had Mystery Science Theater behind it. It really kind of encompasses the cheesy factor that everybody loves about Godzilla, as well as the 30-minute kaiju fight. Though, for a personal level, I think Godzilla vs. Gigan's a bit better than Megalon, but I think Megalon really is more iconic for a lot of people, because people remember it a lot more for some reason or another. But the big one is King Kong vs. Godzilla, because that really established who Godzilla is and what people can expect from Godzilla. And it really brought him into the public domain. He wasn't just a Japanese monster. He's a awesome wrestling promoter. He's an awesome monster to watch in action because he fought King Kong. Who can fight King Kong but Godzilla? From the Heisei era, Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla was going to be my choice, but I'm going to be different. And I'm going to say Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, damn it. Because that movie is awesome. That movie is the greatest movie of all time, and you are all peasants for hating it. Time travel, future aliens, King Ghidorah radiated, Godzilla radiated. They hate each other so much. Come on. It's basically Heisei version of Godzilla vs. King Kong vs. Godzilla. So that's pretty fun. It's a spectacle. It's ludicrous. Probably not the best thing to say for a person that's like, oh, I want something with narrative and really good establishment. Movie's a little wonky on that department. But if you want fun entertainment, a high-octane special effects galore, Godzilla and King Ghidorah just showing off the rivalry 100%, then Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah is that movie for you. See, a solo movie, 84, original, I mean, you can't really go wrong with either of them. They're all really good at establishing what Godzilla is. Though, if it wasn't for Orga, I would have said Millennium, just because it's a unique flavor. It comes after the TriStar movie, and I guess it feels like a response to how TriStar treated Godzilla as not something to behold and have a majestic feel. He felt like another a monster, just a regular monster in that TriStar movie. In the Millennium movie, Godzilla 2000, for those who don't know what it is, they kind of add the aura of what makes Godzilla kind of almost godlike in a sense. Like, even to the ending where Godzilla's just destroying the city and while this, like, holy music is playing in the background. It's kind of chilling, kind of interesting. I think it's a nice way to reestablish what Godzilla is. But I don't think it's going to be for everybody, but it's entertaining. Plus, it has the guy die by saying, Godzilla! And Godzilla kills him. I mean, what can go wrong with that? Everybody said all the good Mothra ones, so I'm gonna go fucking strange. Let's go Ebra, Horror of the Deep, because she appears in there briefly, baby. Who wants a James Bond movie with Godzilla? I do. And that's what we get in Ebra, Horror of the Deep. We have a bunch of freaking freaks and geeks going to an island, finding a terrorist organization called the Rambamboo, run by Dr. Serizawa's evil clone. And they have a giant lobster or a crab or whatever the fuck Ebra is, probably a shrimp, defending the island with his giant claw. And then Mothra comes in to save the day. All the people that are going to die from nuclear explosion. And Godzilla's like, wait, where the fuck everybody go? Where'd everybody go? And he's like, shit, I gotta jump out of here. Peace. Also another Mystery Science Theater movie. So, there. Bizarre picks for you, Wheels, because I don't want to be samey. I want to be cool. I want to be different. I want to be the vape. Peace out.
Alright. Alright, yeah, no, I get where Mooch is coming from, because, like, with Metal and, Sound Out, I don't know why I almost forgot Sound Out's name there, and even, Cinemassacre himself, like, yeah, they've picked probably some of the best choices you can pick, and it's hard to argue with them, because, they're usually really good, and for me, I will agree with, I think Metal, I think I agree with Mucha, is that I'm gonna go out of order too, since most of us have all gone out of order. It's the only way I think we can do it. It's more like the top picks. Starting off with a solo, while I do love 54, and I mostly love it more as King of the Monsters, I think just for nostalgia purposes, 84 is the better film. I don't know why. I really love 84 more than I love 54. I've always gravitated towards that story. There's that weird ambiance of proving why Godzilla is Godzilla, and they even have that whole thing of trying to figure out how is he the original one if we killed the original one. And in the 85 one, they're like, well, we never found a body, so hey, it could still be that one. And ironically, the movie that I don't really like addresses it and properly tries to explain what goes on, but also
contradicts it. You mean the movie
that
was my pick?
Yeah, the movie that was your pick and the one that James Rolfe picked, but I don't agree with, because the problem is because if you watch one version subbed and you watch one version dubbed, it actually contradicts all of the explanations actually going on, to the extent that one of the producers at Toho was like, oh, we're sorry, the official script for the translation was slightly wrong, and they actually said that everyone who had that fan theory was correct. But I do believe 84 is a really good film. I think it has a really good context, especially once you get the issue of the time travel mistake made due to the dub and one of the original subs on home video release. But it's a good film. I think the ending, because they know that Godzilla is a force of nature and they can't immediately kill him, they do find a really unique way to try to hold him off, which goes to my next pick that a lot of people tend to overlook, which is a lot of people's favorite film from the Versus era, Godzilla vs. Biollante, the immediate follow-up where we have Godzilla fighting a mutated clone. And this is a weird taste because this is a part where Japan is about to fall into the lost decade. And this was a time when Japan also was seeing that the advancements of science can actually be a bad thing if it's not controlled properly. And it's not like one of those super anti-science, almost like anti-vaxxers are about, don't stick this vaccine. It's more like you need to put, constraints and restrictions on science or it's going to lead to weird issues. It's the best way of explaining, I guess you would say, Jeff Goldblum's character in Jurassic Park, Malcolm, was it Malcolm? Where he says,
the life finds a way.
Life finds a way, or you thought of, could I do it, not should I do it scenario, which leads to Biollante being created. And that's a great film for a lot of people because it's this huge thing of why Godzilla was created in the first place, and then mankind goes and practically makes another Godzilla. And it's not just mankind in general. It wasn't several people. It was just one mad scientist going, I'm going to recreate my daughter. I'm going to revive my dead daughter.
I want to resurrect my daughter. I'm going to make her Godzilla. Wait,
what?
Dude, no, no.
Exactly. So it's one of those ones where those two films, I think, define a lot about where the Heisei era or the Versus era was originally supposed to go before there was box office problems that led to the weird storytelling that we see with Ghidorah, Mothra, MechaGodzilla 2, Space Godzilla, and Destroya. While those films are still good, I
forgot to say recommend Destroya.
Yeah.
I think that's also a good movie.
The Versus films were going to probably be a whole lot darker had Back to the Future not came in like a wrecking ball. For my next three picks, since everyone's been jumping around and jumbling around, Ghidorah the three-headed monster because, one, it doesn't give proper respect to Mothra herself, and it doesn't give proper respect to Rodan, but goes, hey, this is Ghidorah. This is the real reason why, in the sense of King of the Monsters, the movie that's practically going to be out when this episode airs, is that Ghidorah is this force of nature. This was also the fact that they're explaining not just that there's aliens afoot in outer space, it was also an allegory to the power that the former Soviet Union possessed on the world. Was that it was the greatest enemy, not just to America, not just to Japan, but like just the world in general, that they thought that it was just so evil that it was like it united mankind at one point to be like, yo, we gotta find a way to get the kaiju to work together, because this monster allegedly has destroyed several planets. It's a super weapon that they had to go, Mothra, we need you to kind of go talk to your former enemy Godzilla, as well as this new guy that's actually not a new guy, he's just a guy who survived from another film, Rodan, and get them to be like, yo, we need you guys to actually become Earth's defenders. We need you guys to be the Avengers. And they're like, what? Like, it's a really crazy scheme that is actually a really interesting story about, like, I don't just see it as an allegory to the Cold War. I see it as, like, what is it, an economical, like, ecology, like, you know, like, ecosystem. It's gonna ruin the circle of life, you know? So they were like, we gotta figure out how to stop this invader. So that's my third pick. My last two picks, I'm just gonna go with a nice safe cop-out, and I'm just gonna go with both of the Kiryu films. I think Sound Out only didn't address it, Metal only addressed the first one. I'm gonna go with both. The first one is a really good solid film, and I think it has a great, impactful story that could have led to so much more than its actual, beneficial sequel. The reason that, even though that sequel is still very strong, not just due to the depths of the special effects we see in the film and how the creatures react and the actual narrative, while it is a good carryover, it's just so disconnected because our lead actress, played by Yumio Shaku, who was actually in Kamen Rider Zio recently, the fact that they like kind of just shove her off to the side and go, oh, we need fresh blood, we need to make this a man's film that turns into like this weird homoerotic love story of I hate you but I also secretly love you kind of thing with these two rivals, that made no sense. It's one of those things that really irked me about Tokyo SOS, is that as a follow-up, you take your lead character and just like shove her off and go, oh, we're sending her to America, when she's like waiting at the end of the film to go, yo, I'm ready for this rematch, Godzilla, let's do this thing. That's the only thing that really annoys me. While it's a great sequel and follow-up, it just stiffs everyone that gets that nice ending of the final fight's coming. And then we get to the second film. Now, me and Mucha, I think, talked about in the Timelines episode, and I think possibly in one of the concept episodes, that this was also hyping up our third and final act, especially with the fact that in this film, the idea is just to return Kiryu to the ocean's depths, which Kiryu's weird ghost in the shell storyline activates, grabs Godzilla and takes him to the bottom of the ocean with himself, activates, and it's supposed to insinuate with the weird Easter egg, like Marvel ending of them going, oh yeah, here's more kaiju DNA that people are turning into possibly cybernetic mecha creatures, or just genetically altering and making them new versions of those kaijus, leads to the possibility that there could have been or was going to be a third act in this story. And that's kind of where it kind of does suck, because you have this great female protagonist, gets the shaft, we get this incredible, though, follow-up sequel, which does amazing respect to the character of Mothra, and establishes the original Mothra film and retells Godzilla versus Mothra, not Godzilla versus Mothra, Mothra versus Godzilla in the modern era, and gives you a MechaGodzilla thing. So it's like, I'm not gonna lie, that's, I think, one of the best parts that James Rolfe did mention was you take those two and put it together and you're good. So overall, I think like we covered most of the ground for all of the Godzilla films. We stated that pretty much you can jump in wherever you want. Chronological order is sometimes better for some fans rather than others. Does anyone else have any other thing about saying about like just the picks alone, like the criteria? Like, do you agree? Like it really depends on where you start and where you're going to go, right?
It depends on who you are as a viewer and what you expect from these films. I think the great thing about Godzilla movies is that they all feel very standalone-ish, so you don't really necessarily have to have an in-depth knowledge on all the previous films before it to find a movie that interests you. Like, if you're interested in The Red Bamboo, you don't have to watch the first Godzilla movie to understand Ebra Horror of the Deep, or you don't need to watch the original movie to understand Godzilla vs. Megalon. You don't need to watch Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah to really understand Godzilla vs. MechaGodzilla in the Heisei era. I mean, I think that's kind of the saving grace of a lot of these films, is that it's really your choice what you want to do with them, and there's no real consequence of you skipping films or whatever, because each film does a nice job at just integrating you into what's happening now, because that's their focus, is the narrative of the movie, nothing else.
Also, one thing, though, to wrap it up, though, for people who actually are trying to watch this is another thing that James Rolfe addressed. This is another thing we addressed in all of our previous Godzilla episodes, is the home video release is one of the hardest things if you're a North American fan, due to the fact that we had, Classic Media, we had Sony Entertainment, we have Kraken releasing, and I think there's now Criterion
Media Blasters.
And Media Blasters that all had their names on these films. And previously, we also had, something Filmworks it's not Sentai Filmworks, it was like another film company, Good Times Filmworks or whatever. So the films have been all over the place. I think, Biolante was owned by
Miramax.
Miramax, yeah. Miramax had Biolante.
Yeah, they had that.
Alone.
And Son of Godzilla and the original Godzilla versus MechaGodzilla are like in purgatory.
They're in purgatory.
Yeah.
The Media Blasters releases of the Destroy All Monsters and Megalon are both like out of print right now. They like recycle them back into print every once in a while, but they're mostly out of print most of the time.
Plus, there's like some that are owned by Sony, like Tokyo SOS, like Final Wars, like MechaGodzilla 2.
Well, no, the good thing is the Versus series and the Millennium series, they have everything from King Ghidorah to Final Wars. They do not own the rights to 84. They do not own the rights to Biolante. Miramax has Biolante. 84 is with Kraken. And that was the hardest film to ever reacquire due to the fact that licensing for the 85 adaptation is like in purgatory. It's such a pain in the ass. Because I would like a home video release of that version. It's not like necessary to have, just for completion's sakes. I'd like it since I have, Gojira and King of the Monsters. It's one of those things that I would like both, especially like when we got Gigantus the Fire-Breathing Monster, aka Godzilla Raids Again, with dual audio when it was re-released. Like we had all of the other Godzilla
another one that's
films.
very difficult to find, technically speaking, is the original King Kong versus Godzilla.
Yes, the original King Kong vs. Godzilla allegedly will never be licensed in North America, just due to contractual obligations with Universal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Universal doesn't like the original cut because King Kong takes too much damage.
Well, fuck them.
Criterion picked up, I think, Frankenstein Conquers the World and War of the Gargantuas, but they didn't pick up...
The problem is Criterion's picked up this stuff for their streaming and digital releases, but haven't gotten them out on Blu-ray yet, or have announced any plans to. And I really think they should, because they put all this work into getting these films into like their peak condition, but yet, it's stuck to either Stars on Demand, some other streaming platform, and then digital only. Like, where's the discs? Criterion has been known for their disc releases.
Yeah, and the one thing that I find funny is the fact that Cinemassacre even addresses that. He feels that, if anything, Toho needs to find a way to get the rights to the films back one day and give us, like, a master collection like they were able to provide for their home audience. Just exclude the, almost 1-to-1 scale replica bust of just Godzilla's head from the original.
And Japan needs to do a set of that as Blu-ray because they've only done it as DVD.
Yeah, so I do think it would be great to have a full Godzilla collection, because the closest we ever came to was... I opened up the wrong drawer, guys. I went to the drawer of VHSs, and it was one of the Good Time releases or whatever. But they
the
tried
Classic Media did like all of their Showa films into one set. The better one that's come out recently was that all of the Sony-owned movies got thrown together into a set.
Well, yeah, no, but what I was trying to refer to is before we even had digital format, there was one VHS company that actually, I think, released everything from 54 to 85 in North America. And it was like a co-production, I think, with one of the UK branches, because there is an actual different English dub for the Return of Godzilla, different from the one released on the Kraken one. The one on the Kraken one, I think, is the current day redub that Toho did for some of their films, like they did with Ebra, to be 100% accurate with the original cut. Whereas the UK Omni dub is still out there, but has never been seen in North America except on rips on YouTube that are no longer available, if anyone recalls. But yeah, no, there was a VHS release that I remember seeing as a kid of all of them released by the same company too, on the VHSs where they were all scattered as well. So, I mean, it's been a very hectic thing for Godzilla, because don't forget there was that weird thing where companies back in the day could easily just secure rights even if another company was already producing it on film. So you could have multiple copies, multiple boxes from the same company or their subsidiaries. And it's interesting because especially with the Toho Kaiju that are not I wouldn't say not, but the ones that are still Toho Kaijus that are not either primarily Godzilla featurettes or actually are Godzilla featured mainstays. It's also funny how we have Mill Creek, who has Tokyo Shock, who has Atragon in them, and it's getting really ridiculous when you look at the wide variety of just trying to have not just the Godzilla franchise, but the Kaiju Tokusatsu special effects genre as a whole. If you want to have Latitude Zero, if you want to have Dagora, it's a minefield of disaster out there. It's gonna be hard. So, for people who have the money and can afford to search down some of these DVDs or Blu-rays, go out and do it. For the movies that are the harder ones to get, you might actually need to resort to illegal torrenting or streaming just to see them.
Or having friends in Japan.
Yeah. But since we did go through, like, what are our picks, our choices and agreements with Rolf's decisions, we just want to talk about the overall extent of, since King of the Monsters is out by the time this episode is going to air, we just want to talk about possibilities of the future of the Monsterverse and because because Mucha and I think Sounder and I have addressed the alarming situation of Toho trying to do their own monster universe in Japan, as well as the fact that Legendary has been heavily trying to keep at least Toho happy enough to let them continue using the properties because they really want to continue Monsterverse after Godzilla vs. Kong. However, a lot of people don't think it's going to happen, even though some inside rumors say Toho's thinking about at least making movies themselves while also letting America make movies, but it seems very 60-40, 50-50, and really sketchy right now. So, since Visible Ninja's been the most silentest in the last 10 minutes, I'm going to let him go and start off.
Been cut out of his mouth.
We haven't done that yet. He hasn't said anything vulgar on Twitter in like 8 years.
Like, I kind of hope it pans out, because I know currently there are no plans past, Godzilla vs. Kong. But I really do hope that both that King of the Monsters does well enough that maybe they consider, hitting up Toei, maybe seeing if they can maybe get at least another movie, maybe another Kong movie out of it. But, only time will tell. As for Toho, we know that they've been interested in cranking out, at least a monster movie a year, starting, 2021, I think, with a supposed Ghidorah movie. At least that's what we've been hearing. So there's definitely hope there. I mean, obviously, we're not going to get a sequel to Shin Godzilla at this point, despite, that ending. You know what? My hopes are pretty bright that hopefully that either, Japan will carry it on through this new supposed series, or maybe, like I said, King of the Monsters does well enough that Toho and Legendary or American Studios or whatever can hopefully keep it going. Maybe not just with Godzilla and Kong, maybe with some other monsters. I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe a Rodan movie, maybe a Mothra movie that involves some fairies.
Hey, did you know that there's 3 fairies?
Yeah, Laura, Mole, and Belvira.
The goth girlfriend.
Exactly. She's best fairy.
That's true. We have the facts.
Alright, let's go to the Swinger and the Singer for his thoughts on the future of Monsterverse or Toho's plea to make their own series.
So I think that when it comes down to it, as much as Toho wants to do one thing or Legendary wants to do their own thing, at the end of the day, what drives all of these creative decisions is that money. Because if King of the Monsters makes that money, then I think Legendary has a good chance of continuing to make more movies. I think if King of the Monsters kind of falls flat on its face and doesn't do amazing, then Godzilla vs. Kong is going to come out, and that'll be kind of the end of the Legendary Monsterverse. As for Toho, I think that while they want to do movies, they've had kind of a lot of misses with Shin Godzilla and the anime trilogy. While on the other hand,
I don't think Shin Godzilla is a miss if it.
Financially, sorry, not creatively.
No, it was a big hit financially.
In Japan, it wasn't a worldwide hit though.
Well, because they didn't really release it worldwide.
Well, they had multiple
very
screenings
limited
of it in
though.
the U.S. It was a limited release because most Japanese films are a limited release.
It was so well received though that they extended it. So.
Let's remember this. It was put out by Funimation Films, who also put out Dragon Ball Super Broly, the only foreign language film to hit the top 10 North American box office.
I think it's a little different with Dragon Ball and then Godzilla, because anime is this super popular.
There is a big trend in the fact that Godzilla is a very recognizable icon for not just the closer, like the younger generations like Dragon Ball is, but to older generations as well. Shin Godzilla, for whatever movie it is, I don't think was a very marketable film, while 2014 Godzilla was easily marketed based off of its setup, and it's kind of like, it's got that more international market in mind with its mindset. Whereas I feel like
what also helped with Shin Godzilla though is that it won awards for its existence.
But let's remember, just because it wins awards or just because it's a good movie doesn't mean that it's going to be a financial success.
I mean, technically it was in Japan, but I think we're getting...
No, the problem is that he's talking about, like, internationally it didn't get everyone because, as I've argued with you, Mucha, it was just so grounded in more being Japanese than just being a movie that everyone can resonate with. It was very... It was very excluding.
Exactly, because the
Japanese
thing
movie.
is that if you didn't understand Japan's political position at the time of Shin Godzilla, you lose all of the commentary that movie was making. And the
I
fact that the
see.
movie was a lot of commentary, and it was a very more deep, intrinsic, character-driven film, as opposed to one that has more spectacle, which grabs more audiences. There's a very distinctive reason why the MCU movies are one of the most successful franchises of all time. It's because they're very easy to watch. You don't have to think too hard about them. So while the craft itself does not elevate, the money that it brings in with the connections to its audience is what we get here. So the thing is that with Godzilla and the Monsterverse, you have Godzilla, you have Kong Skull Island, both did pretty okay. They've done enough to continue, but I don't think they've been smash hits. But if King of the Monsters is a smash hit, well, it's had a ton of buzz, coming out a week after Aladdin, which, let's remember, Kong Skull Island came out 2 weeks after Beauty and the Beast, and that was what kind of buried that movie. So it depends, I think, on, the timing and the release of King of Monsters, and see if it's going to do good box office sales or if it's going to get drowned out by Aladdin. Because I think that's going to essentially dictate Toho's future direction, because if they, have this international plan with the legendary films, and it just doesn't turn out to be a financial money hole for them, then they're probably just going to internalize and do something similar to Shin Godzilla that just appeals to their domestic market, and they can just work with that. I think that in the case of the anime films, as well as Shin Godzilla, they hit in Japan, but not so much elsewhere, which just shows that if that's the direction they're going to go in, basically if the Legendary Universe doesn't hit everywhere else, as well as Japan.
Were you done?
That's it.
Okay. Mucha, I guess your thoughts on Monsterverse or Toho's take on Godzilla?
Man, we talked about that a lot, so I don't know what else I could really add. I don't know about the Monsterverse. I guess I hope it does continue, but I'm not exactly pounding on the table for it, if that makes sense. Like, I'm not devoted to what it's doing. I feel like...
Yeah, no, after the first Godzilla film, I can see where you're coming from. Because while they tried to do a narrative of characters based on a Toho film, they didn't have the depth required to keep that investment, and that's also why Toho was not also entirely happy with the first Legendary outing.
I mean, here's the thing about the Legendary movie. It's more Hollywood than Godzilla, if that makes sense. When I think of the Monsterverse, I just think of how Hollywood it is, because it's like they're afraid to commit to what Godzilla is all about, like the absurdity and not necessarily the message, because Godzilla's messages can change sporadically. Doesn't really matter. But it doesn't really keep to what Godzilla films are all about, which is Godzilla and focusing on what Godzilla is or what the threat is in that movie. The first movie focused so much on Kick-Ass that I felt like the movie was just about that guy instead of Godzilla, And I feel like that's kind of something that I guess Western audiences are like. They need to have a focus on a human.
But yet that was everyone's complaint about the movie. Let's remember that even the Western audiences were like, there's too much human, not enough Godzilla.
Not enough Godzilla. But I mean, I think that Hollywood's just too afraid to really embrace a Godzilla movie, They're not.
I think we'll have to see with King of the Monsters, because honestly, I think the first shot was a lot of budgeting and they just didn't commit to it. But we'll see if they took the feedback from audiences where people said there's too many humans and not enough monsters. And they're adding a lot of monsters, so hopefully they're kind of going more into that, let's put the focal point on Godzilla. I feel like there's more Godzilla footage in the trailers we've gotten for King of the Monsters than the entirety of the 2014 movie.
The interesting thing is that the movie that I mentioned, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, did exactly that, where it focused mostly on the monsters' personalities and really fleshing them out. So if King of the Monsters can do something similar to that extent of just exploding the monsters' personalities and their mystique, then I think people might be more interested to watch those movies and have it continue on. But if it continues with the whole character human drama that really isn't focused on Godzilla necessarily, but just something mundane as I have to get back to save my family by taking a Twenu. The reason people like Bryan Cranston's character in the 2014 movie was because he was connected to Godzilla. He and his exploits and what he was looking for was connected all to what Godzilla was doing and the Mutos is doing. What Kick-Ass is doing in that movie, I have no clue. So hopefully they can learn that lesson and say, maybe we can embrace what Godzilla's all about. We don't have to be cliche Hollywood movie and just say, we need to have a focus on humans and stuff.
Hollywood's also changed a lot in the last 5 years.
That's true. There's more sex scandals.
No, they were always there. They're just more revealed now.
But yeah, hopefully Monsterverse can do something impressive with King of the Monsters. I'm not holding my breath because it's Hollywood. I can't really put my confidence in them, no matter how hard they try to appeal to someone like me. As for what Toho's doing, Toho do whatever they want, baby. I hope Toho knows what they're doing. I would really love to see a sequel to Shin Godzilla, but I know that's not in the cards at the moment, unless they shock us and go like, heel turn, Shin Godzilla 2, baby. And we're like, holy shit, they're coming out with another one. But yeah, I hope they have an idea. I hope they don't really go with the MCU route, because the MCU route did out a little too much,
It only has worked for the MCU.
Yeah, but even then, Godzilla did it first, MCU, so calm your tits. I hope they have interesting ideas going on while they're still working out the kinks of waiting, because if they don't have an idea, then things are not going to turn out well for them.
The thing I do know is that we haven't had any announcements beyond Kong vs. Godzilla, but with Kong vs. Godzilla being already, filmed in post-production now, it's very likely that they probably have a plan to say, okay, look at King of Monsters did this money. Toho's like, all right, we're going to, do our own universe, our Legendary, you get another movie. And then they'll probably announce something.
Yeah, that's the thing about Toho. And Japan-wise, when they make a movie, they're very, on point with it. And that once they announce it, it's get down to business with that and take all the time in the world for that, so that it's done in time. They'll announce a movie in 2014 and be done in 2014. But it's funny that we're talking about the Monsterverse, because I did have a conversation with a coworker, and this is just a funny comment, about what was going to happen after Godzilla vs. King Kong, and he said it's going to be Godzilla vs. Pacific Rim, and then after Godzilla vs. Pacific Rim, it's going to be Godzilla vs. Kong vs. Pacific Rim, and then it's going to be Godzilla vs. Pacific Rim vs. Schindler's List, and then we find out the plot twist that Godzilla's Jewish, and he's out to fight Nazis, and it's going to be great. So stay tuned for that. I want to see Godzilla vs. Schindler's List now. Come on. Who wouldn't want to see...
Okay, I just gotta ask, did this bullshit theory all come up to the fact that you may or may not have told your coworker about a space Godzilla and the space diabetes?
I did not tell him that story, but I could. One day. Now that you say that, Wheels, you know what they have to do now. They have to make it in the modern era. The space Godzilla.
No. They need to make it, but it has to be a Netflix exclusive, animated series.
Yes. Man, now we're pumping out ideas. Let's do it, baby. Come on.
Okay, so anyways, so I just want to add to this because we're going on a little longer than usual, which is a good and a bad thing. Bad thing for me, good thing for us. But I want to add that, like Mucha, I somewhat agree with the fact is, Monsterverse, I enjoy it. I am not entirely for it. King of the Monsters is the one that really has redeemed a lot of the qualities that I saw were missing from our first Godzilla film. Kong Skull Island, while it's kind of a standalone film that was brought into the Monsterverse as it was coming out, as there were final trailers, final parts of production, oh yeah, it is Monsterverse. We have Godzilla vs. Kong. I was excited for, but still skeptical with. The reason I think with this Godzilla verse is that because they did Monsterverse and they thought, let's just go big or go home, baby, for the sequel and bring in the three other great Kaiju titans, the pillars of Kaiju for Toho. They were
one.
Well, yeah, Anguillus is technically one, but...
Also MechaGodzilla.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, they bring in, the original four, and they're you got Godzilla there, and they bring in the other three with them. And I go, that's great and all, but you should give Rodan and Mothra their own little story of why they're here, what's going on, and not try to cram it into just one Ghidorah film. I feel like that's the only thing that's...
I feel like it's going to be a Batman v Superman thing.
I feel like it's not going to be as bad as Batman v Superman. I don't feel like it's going to be as bad as that, but I feel like it's going to be just a little straining, like some of the MCU films kind of are, when they're oh, here are 8 already predetermined or pre-established characters, but here they're going to finally meet these other 4, or here's some 2 other guys joining up. I feel it's going to be a little bit like how we had the first Avengers film, or a little bit like the issues with at least Infinity War versus Endgame kind of scenario of we're just bringing in maybe a little bit too much at once for our sequel or one of our first phase kind of films. And it's one of those those things where it's like, because we don't have other films already lined up, like there's not a Godzilla 3 penned in, there's not a Kong Skull Island 2, it's just Godzilla versus Kong, there will be a winner. It's like, okay, this means that this could end up being completely finished. It could be completely wrapped up and concluded because Toho either just wants out or they're just not liking how they're doing it. Like, I get where Mooch is coming from. It's getting a little too Hollywood-like. Or maybe they're just tired of having to hold Legendary Pictures' hand. Because there's that whole fact that Toho is opening up a filming studio lot in Hollywood, California. Is that because they're trying to just move a team there to work with Legendary while they maybe make their own? Is there a possibility that they're trying to maybe coerce Legendary saying, hey, we want you to kill Monsterverse for what you did right now, but redo Monsterverse with us completely as, like, the real overseers and the real producers over here, like a co-production? Because, like, there's, like, 3 theories out. Is that either we're going to have Toho stop Monsterverse and do their own thing. We're either going to have Monsterverse and Toho doing separate things from each other. So we're going to have a Toho-verse and an American-verse. And then there's the third probability of we're going to get both. And Toho's also going to be trying to make American productions as well as making Japanese productions while letting Legendary do productions of their own. Like, there's so much things going on right now because of the fact that, Toho is buying property out in California to start their own studios, or they were reinvesting in a studio that they had closed down that was just a licensing distributor for Toho Studios, like to license out stuff. So there's like a lot of crazy stuff going on. Personally, I do feel like if Toho tries to go back to basics, if they get the rights back and there's either no Monsterverse or they're working, alongside Monsterverse where Monsterverse is doing its own thing and they're doing their own thing, the thing that I want them to do is I do want them to give certain kaiju standalone films. I don't think every kaiju deserves one. The kaijus that I believe deserve standalone films are characters like your Rodan, your Mothra, Godzilla. I would love to see a Ghidorah film. But the way that I want a Ghidorah film to be, and I've said this before I think on a previous episode, I want the Ghidorah film to be like, you hear this like narrator narrating the stories of like all these alien homeworlds that have been attacked. You make it that
it's like a documentary.
Yeah, you tell it as like a narration, like a historical file, and you have it that each act of the film is 3 separate voices. And then the reveal is the 3 voices are the 3 consciousnesses of each of the separate individual heads telling their depiction of them destroying a homeworld. Like, I would love to see it. And like, the way you do it is that you have Godzilla, you have maybe your Mothra film, you have your Rodan film. Hell, maybe you do Godzilla versus Mothra after you do those 3 films. And then like, after that, you have the Ghidorah film, and the Ghidorah film's with him literally flying towards Earth. And then like you have that plot twist B where it's like the 3rd head and goes, and now we're on to our next conquest. And then it just shows Earth. That would be like a really cool tale. I think, though, that it's too ambitious to give Ghidorah that much personality. But the fact that, Ghidorah was given personality like that in Rebirth of Mothra, and Ghidorah was also given personality like that in the Mark Saraceni children's books, could be an incredible idea. Just for Ghidorah alone to make him this monster that they repel him the first time, and then he comes back later. And like, here's the way you do it. You don't even have it that the Exilian created him. You don't have it that they control him. You have it that he controls them. And that like they're his minions, like they're his slaves that come to planets to try to help him take over the world.
So he's the true space commie.
Like, that's what I'm saying, is like, he's the one who controls them all. Like, it's just like a hive mind of telepathy. I feel like that would be a great way to build up your Monsterverse for Toho if they wanted to take that route. I feel like Toho can do something if they just look to all of their universes, all of their timelines, and they could devise a story out of concepts they've already addressed and tell it in a new style that fits the modern era of storytelling, whether it's the Japanese way of action films or the American Hollywood side. And I think that's also the problem, is if you were able to get that element of the American branch and the Japanese branch to just actually work on a co-production rather than splitting the production on one side of the Pacific Ocean, where the Americans going with their side and the Japanese, I feel like if you had them actually like meet in the middle and go, we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, it'd be so much of a better production where Monsterverse could actually feel like a Monsterverse. And I think that's the real issue that I'm having for both sides, is that I'm having visions of grandeur that neither studio is willing to, I think, try to put the effort in, because they're just thinking in the mindset of, how does this sell for our audience? How does this sell for this audience? And that's the ultimate thing of who's going to outdo who at this point, because they're also in a dick measuring contest, because that's what Japan's always like every time America tries to approach the Godzilla property.
They're not that petty, Wheels. Come on, just kidding.
Oh, they're that petty.
They can be pretty petty. They can be. So overall, I want to wrap this up before I have any more technical difficulties tonight. And to start us off, like I said, Visible Ninja, you go. Give your shameless plugs.
He's dead.
Woohoo! No, I'm not dead. I just have to hit unmute. Alright, just follow me on Twitter at VisibleNinja0 and check me out on YouTube at Visible Ninja Dojo.
Joker.
Short and simple to the point. Awesome. So, I have a Twitter called Janitor Joker. Nobody knows about it. Don't tell anyone. Damn, delete this, Wheels. I do a thing called Toku Warriors because I can. So you can follow that on the Facebook or the Twitter. It's up to you. And I have a blog on WordPress called The Real Janitor Jokers where I'm doing Godzilla stuff because, funny enough, I did a bunch of Godzilla look-backs. I've done 20 so far. So maybe read those, or don't. I really don't care. I'm gonna go make Schindler's List versus Godzilla.
Sound out.
I'm on YouTube at SoundOut12, and I am also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, also at SoundOut12. I do Toku stuff, and I do Gundam stuff, and I sometimes start revolutions among groups of people to try to take down Amazon. So, fun stuff.
I'm Wheelchair21. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Wheelchair21. Instagram is Taja_Doyle. And with Hero Club, you know how to follow us either in the description below or on the outro. We'll see you all next time with most likely our review of Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
Hey, it's Wheelchair21, and thanks again for listening to an all-new episode of Los Ingobernables de Tokusatsu. If you want to hear more content or see more content from the Hero Club YouTube channel, we're going to need you to subscribe, like, comment with some feedback, and share this channel with a friend. We also would like you to check out our website, hero-club.com, and follow us on various social media outlets just by looking up Hero Club for Life, as well as the stores you see are where we shop. Anyways, thanks again, and we'll see you all next time.